I will never get on a plane unless there's two Delta pilots, at least two Delta pilots.
Never.
On that plane, never.
In late 2021, the EU Aviation Safety Agency began evaluating the concept of single-pilot operation by establishing an expert group composed of industry stakeholders to draft a report that would serve as a basis of its best intervention strategy, an ESA standard procedure that helps the agency shape its rulemaking priorities. The second phase of the project recently started in 2024, with research being conducted into the hazards and risks of reduced crew operations, as well as the potential mitigations. The EU regulatory authority is heavily vested and invested in the outcome of this work and continues to make decisions to move forward well before the safety work has been fully vetted.
It's hard to believe that some aircraft manufacturers and special interest groups are willing to put profits ahead of safety and reduce the number of pilots required to be on the flight deck.
This concept is obviously commercially driven by some airlines that see a potential of saving money by reducing the number of pilots during long-haul flights. I'm sure it's tempting to gain this competitive edge through the elimination of this pilot. However, they may find themselves unpleasantly surprised to discover that commercial incentives are an extremely risky driver in aviation.
We must continue to dig in and stop special interests from gambling with safety by trying to eliminate the most important safety features on trains and airplanes, the people at the controls. Last year, recognizing the urgent need to stop reduced crew operations, ALPA partnered with the European Cockpit Association and the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations in a coordinated campaign against RCO, as you see. This is an issue that won't happen first on US or Canadian shores. It will happen abroad first. So we need to work with our partners across the world to make our voices heard. Joining me on stage is Captain Ochan de Bruin for a conversation about the threat of RCO and safety and how we're going to work together as a global community to stop it. Ochan has been working in the aviation industry more than 3 decades. He has flown for KLM Royal Dutch Airlines since 1990 and currently is a 787 and 777 captain. Ochan has represented pilots in many different positions over his career since becoming a member of V&V, the Dutch Airline Pilots Association, in 1989. In 2014, he started his position as Director of Professional Affairs at the ECA, becoming Vice President and ECA's Executive Vice President, Europe for IFALPA. Since 2020, Ochan has been President of the ECA. Please join me in welcoming Ochan. So we've been together many times doing things like this, and I always appreciate the honest and open dialogue. As I said in my opening remarks, most people in this room know where we're at and that there are regulators actively supporting manufacturers to fast-track EMCO, RCO. So, there's a lot of background to cover. What is EMCO? It's single pilot crews. Don't let anybody fool you that somehow this is just, we're extending a duty day or it's anything of the like. It's single pilot ops during cruise. The goal is to get rid of pilot augmentation and save airlines money, and it's an economics, not a safety issue, despite what arguments you hear. So early in my term, even as I was an elect before I was into this position, Ochan reached out and congratulated me on my new position before I even knew what I was getting myself into here, and said, hey, let's get together for a conversation. And I certainly appreciate that phone call, and you brought me up to speed on what was going on in Europe with RCO, the regulator EASA, and just ECA's developments in general. So first, welcome, and please tell us what's going on in Europe on this so far.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about this important topic at the Air Safety Forum. The MCO, or Single Pilot Cruise, you already explained it, what the abbreviation means. First signals of reduced crew operation concepts has been, I think, on the table already for many years. But after COVID, it accelerated, where Airbus put forward a proposal to EASA, the European Oversight Authority, to discuss this concept of single pilot cruise. A so-called MCO expert group was formed, where stakeholders started discussing all the ins and outs of this concept, and especially also discuss the risk and hazards of this concept. And they are huge, as you know. That started in 2021. It concluded at the end of last year. What also started last year was an important research activity funded by the European Union. And this is a large consortium doing all kinds of research on the risk and hazards and potential mitigations related to single pilot cruise. What we are currently waiting for is the start of a so-called rulemaking process, where stakeholders, in which Boeing and FAA also observers, will talk about all the regulations which have to change. It's impacting a lot of things, like medical issues, human factors, pilot training, operations. There's a huge amount of regulations which need to be adapted, changed. And then the outlook is that in 2027, as you mentioned, a formal proposal will come from EASA towards the European Commission. And then the European Parliament, together with the Council of Ministers of all the EU member states, are able to vote on approving this concept. Let me be very clear. For us, the European Cockpit Associating, we are representing all the European pilots, commercial pilots. We're fighting really hard because we see it as a large and very dangerous gamble with safety. It is our #1 priority, and I think that says everything about how we deal with this concept.
So maybe expound a little bit on the rulemaking process is already underway, yet the study you referred to is not completed yet.
Yeah, that's a weird, way of doing things. The research activity, which started last year, so is researching the risks and hazards and the possible mitigation. They're doing it by having a large pilot survey among a huge amount of pilots in Europe. They are doing simulator trials to gather data on things like fatigue, for instance. So these simulator trials are ongoing right now, but also doing some literature reviews on existing studies. For instance, to give you an example, on the physiological needs, where also some of the mitigations for these needs are investigated, and the potential of wearing a so-called diaper, which is used by astronauts, is actually on the table and is investigated as a potential mitigation. So that's how far this goes. This research activity is about to conclude its work somewhere at the beginning of next year. But indeed, as you say, in the meantime, EASA has announced already starting a rulemaking activity, which for us doesn't make any sense, because if you haven't proven, scientifically proven at least, that such a new concept can be introduced in a safe way, with all the risks mitigated in a safe way, why start rulemaking? It doesn't make any sense.
It certainly does not. A show of hands, who wants to wear a diaper so you can have single pilot cruise? I didn't think so. Yeah, it's remarkable that EASA has gotten out in front of this, and earlier this year announced their intent to move forward with rulemaking while this study is ongoing. So well over a year before the study is scheduled to conclude, that they're going to go ahead and move forward with the rulemaking.
Yeah, and there are two other problems at the table. So far in this whole research and discussion, the views of psychological experts, medical experts, have not been taken into account. We have asked as ECA many times to EASA to include those experts in the discussion, because the implications on that field are huge. And it has not been taken along yet, so we hope and expect that EASA will follow up and will start a secondary research activity soon, looking specifically at these aspects. So what's left on the table is nothing. We have absolutely no data, no scientific data for proof that this single-pilot cruise concept could be introduced and still attain the same or higher level of safety.
Yeah, you just said something there, to go off on a tangent, but we hear that an equivalent level of safety, equivalent level of safety. Well, if we settled for equivalent level of safety in the 80s, we'd have a lot of dead bodies right now. So the fact is, we should always be trying to increase safety, like you've heard today, heard the administrator, and I know you share that view, that we should always be striving to be safer. Just equivalent doesn't do it.
No, it doesn't. I think we have seen, as you said, and I think this complexity of aviation, of our work as pilots, as professionals, is only increasing. The complexity of the aircraft is increasing, and that demands a higher level of safety. It's also the first time that EASA has, engaged in such a rulemaking activity in a concept which is not built to enhance safety, but looking at what the fallout is introduction of that many risks and hazards, which we haven't seen before.
Does ECA have a seat at the table in the rulemaking?
Yeah, we do. This rulemaking, the formal meetings are announced to kick off somewhere this fall. We are there with one main representative, but with a multitude of experts, because as I said, it has a lot of angles on medical, human factors, operations, pilot training, and some more. So we have gathered a group of experts, SMEs, to be able to deal with all these new questions relating to this. So, our role and our mission there is to, also to educate the stakeholders there, to educate EASA, showing them, guys, this is just a bad idea. You should not continue with this. This is too dangerous. You're introducing that many new risks which cannot be mitigated and provide the same or higher level of safety. And I hope in that process that we'll be able to find allies in that rulemaking group, with hopefully also with the FAA and with Boeing as observers, and share a common approach and push this development in the right direction.
Yes, to your point, the FAA has also been invited as an observer to the rulemaking process, and they've accepted. And we're certainly encouraging the FAA to take a proactive approach at, this is a bad idea. We're not interested in this, before it ends up coming to our shores, because we know that you and Europe are at the pointy end of the spear here, and then while we have encouraging comments like those from Administrator Whitaker today, that if it's allowed to happen in other parts of the world, then it's gonna come to our shores, and there'll be pressure, economic pressure on our airlines. There'll be pressure on our regulators to follow suit. So that's why it's so important that the work you're doing in Europe and the support we're attempting to give you as well.
Thank you. I think it's important we have this cooperation, Jason. When we started discussing this more than 2 years ago, it was starting the discussion in Europe. The whole rulemaking process was in the initial phase, and I'm very grateful for the support you and ALPA are providing to the to the global campaign we have organized. It's only a joint effort from your organization, from Europe, and also involving IFALPA at a global level to make this work and coordinate and be strong together. That's the only solution.
So we found in the last year and a half that a lot of even our own members don't think this is real. That this is something that's it's never going to happen in my career, right? So what are you doing in Europe to try to educate your members, to get more people educated, get them more engaged on what we can do to raise awareness?
Yeah. So I think our basic mission on RCO in Europe is to make sure that EASA stops the regulation of this concept. That's very clear. At the same time, we are engaging and educating the public. We are educating the decision makers in Brussels. And why? Because we want this process to happen in full transparency and not something behind the scenes, regulatory process somewhere nobody knows about. And the same applies to our members, to the pilots in Europe. I believe we have been able to do a lot of campaigns. Our members of the various European countries have created very nice and effective campaigns on their own, doing a wide variety of things. Writing papers, strikes picketing at airports, interviews, all kinds of things which help to educate, I think, both the public, the decision makers, and the pilots. And that's important because we will need support from all of them in this process.
So you mentioned legislators here in the U.S. We have a Hill Day, or what we call it the Legislative Summit, every June. With the FAA reauthorization successfully completed, our Hill Day this year is surrounded around thanking them for their support on the FAA reauthorization, but also educating them, as you're explaining, on what's out there, what's really happening, what the threats are. And I know that our legislators here have been very receptive. First they were like, that can't be real. And it's like, yeah, it's real. And here's what the threat is. And they're like, well, we fly on you every week back and forth from DC. So we definitely want at least 2 pilots in the flight deck at all times. So we've had a good response from legislators and lawmakers. How has the reception been in Europe?
We just had European elections this summer. That means that this whole new cycle of the next couple of years needs to start educating new people. There's a lot of turnover, new people in the European Parliament, new decision makers, new people in the European Commission's Transport Commission, and they need to be educated. So it's a process which has just kicked off, where we are inviting these new Parliament members to come over and to educate them in this process. But the work we've done before, most of the people, some of those people have left, gone somewhere else. So we are starting a whole new cycle of education. But the main task of our involvement lies with EASA. They are the ones regulating this concept and deciding on where this is moving on. And on the horizon, when a formal proposal on legislation comes out or is made, for now it stands at 2027, then of course a much higher pressure can be implemented also on lobbying into the right direction with the European Commission and the European Parliament members.
Yeah, so we're attempting to get lawmakers to send those messages now and say, don't bother bringing it to us. Don't waste your time. You've got more important things, SMS, all these other things. Don't even waste your time. So we're keeping the heat on everywhere, like you are, to raise the awareness and leave no stone unturned. Of course, EASA is one step. FAA is a step, but we have to consider ICAO, right? ICAO is a big piece in all this. What can you speak of where we are at ICAO?
Yeah. Well, interesting developments. You know, Airbus and EASA cannot do this alone. They need the worldwide approval stamp of ICAO to be able to roll out this concept, especially for the long-haul flights, the single-pilot cruise. And they are, of course, pushing at that table too. So they're proposing to let it materialize, more specifically to create a budget at ICAO to start discussing more formally the approval process of single-pilot cruise. At the last flight operations panel meeting, this call for a budget was denied, which is a good development, but it means, so far, in my view, just a delay, not a termination. A special subgroup has been formed in which the concept will be discussed further, but at a lower importance level. But they are still pushing ahead. We see it on all fronts. They're still asking to get this budget, and next year the ICAO Council meeting will be extremely important, where I think an official push again from Airbus in this case, and Dassault, the business jet developer in Europe, are pushing very hard to get an approval process going at the ICAO level. So that's why it's extremely important to collaborate with IFALPA, what we do. We talk to them all the time. We keep them up to date on what's ongoing in Europe. You do the same. What is happening with the FAA, with Boeing in the US and Canada, to make sure that they have all the right information to fight this fight in their battleground in Montreal at ICAO.
And to your point, we met yesterday here.
Yeah.
Our colleagues and friends from IFALPA are here with us. We took this opportunity to sit down and do exactly that. What's going on at ICAO? What's the landscape? All right, what's our next plan? And I like the fact that we're thinking 6, 12, 18, 24 months. What's our long-term strategy? What do we do tactically now based on the Flight Ops Working Group meeting? What's our next steps? And I like the fact that we came out of that meeting with, hey, look, we need to submit multiple working papers the next ICAO Council next fall. So we're thinking over a year out on developing working papers and working together on those working papers to support IFALPA and working to have boots on the ground at that council. Mm-hmm. So with the goal of keeping it off, because at ICAO, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably know more about it than I do, but it's like a job card. Mm-hmm. And if they get tasked to look at it, then they have to look at it. They've got a lot of stuff and people want a lot of things. While other parts of the world are still struggling with just culture, which we take largely for granted in the United States and Canada and largely in Europe, there's parts of the world struggling for that, but yet, special interests want to push this to the top of the list, yeah, and so on. Yeah. So keeping that off is essential, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And we all have to fight our own battles, I think. The three main battlegrounds where we are doing this is, of course, Europe, where we have the airplane manufacturer Airbus, who's the main stakeholder pushing it, and the oversight authority EASA. You are doing the same here in the US, and IFALPA has their own battle turf. But it's only through this, I think, intensive coordination we have developed in the Safety Starts With Two campaign, which we are using as a tool for structuring our campaign, where we deal with airplane manufacturers. We deal with the public with our communication strategy, but also we are trying to educate our members around the world. I think here in the US, Canada, and also in Europe, a lot of our member associations are very well aware of the danger of this concept, of the development, but we need the whole world. We need Asia Pacific, South America, Africa, and the Middle East to be aware of this too, because once it's in this approval process with ICAO, it will pop up somewhere in the world, and maybe not in the countries where there is the highest resistance, like here or in Europe, but there are other parts in the world where it could easily pop up then. Yeah.
I was proud to with ALPA Canada, we've rejoined the International Transport Workers Federation. And as you say, the more visibility we give to this, the more people we educate, the better it's getting. We're just coming back into the ITF. We've received just incredible support by them. All the other groups that aren't pilots, groups that aren't flight attendants, but people that are just transport workers, whether it be everything from rideshare drivers to every segment of transportation has been behind us. It's been great. This Congress coming up next month in Marrakesh, we expect them to come out with policy statements about reduced crew ops. So getting this message out there and making sure that we're constantly engaging everyone we can to ensure that all the boots are on the ground, I think we'll ultimately we'll be rewarded with success.
Yeah, that's what I hope too, definitely.
That's right.
Yeah.
We've only got a couple minutes left. I was going to do a couple questions, but I don't think we have enough time. So, we've seen some recent events here in the U.S. where having at least 2 pilots in the cockpit has been essential. The FedEx situation in Austin, we spoke about it earlier, the Alaska tour bug incident. Could you imagine being in the middle of the Atlantic at night and the door plug comes off on your 777 or 787 and being by yourself?
No.
Up there?
No, it's crazy. That's crazy. I think for us and most of the people here who are pilots in the room, just thinking about this, come up with this huge amount of scenarios where they think, oh, how do you deal with this? And one of the most issues I have with not understanding a manufacturer like Airbus is we have this concept, the CRM, the cruise resource management. It's been developed since I think the 70s. It's one of the key elements I see where what has contributed to the high level of safety we have nowadays. But for CRM, you need 2 pilots. You can't do CRM by yourself. And so Airbus is more or less, throwing it out of the window into the trash bin and just saying, oh, it's not important. It's not a contributor to safety. That doesn't make any sense to me.
And the key is that CRM you correctly point out. How about an incident that's not a normal checklist or not in an abnormal checklist? Yeah. Something that's just crazy. Shit happens. Yeah. That pilots need 2 of us to go, what is going on right now? Yeah. And assess the situation, silence the bell, work the problem. Yeah. How do you silence the bell, work the problem with just 1 person? Yeah. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. And if that person's somehow incapacitated or on that physiological break, now what? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, well, I think the biggest takeaway here, or one of the biggest takeaways for the folks in the room that may not have heard this before is, this is one of the biggest threats, if not the biggest threat facing us right now. It's a safety threat. Don't let anybody tell you that it's an industrial thing and that we're mislabeling it as a safety threat because it's about jobs. It's not about jobs. It's not about jobs by the time you get to the international wide-body pilots. It's about safety, and that the most important safety device on any aircraft is a minimum of 2 well-trained, qualified, and rested pilots in the cockpit at all times, not just for takeoff and landing. So with that, I want to thank you again for coming all the way over here. I was proud to join you in Brussels for your meeting in June, and hope to enjoy more collaboration like we have for the last 1.5 years. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you. Thanks.